Welcome to London, and as John said just moments ago, Portugal's caretaker Prime Minister José Sócrates has admitted that his country is asking the European Union for financial help. Well, his comments come just hours after his finance minister said that the country would need a bailout. Well, Filipe Garcia is a Portuguese economist. He joins us now on the line from Porto in Portugal. Your reaction?
Hello. I think Portugal is now facing reality. For some time now we have been saying that the Portuguese government was somehow on a denial position because it was clear to everyone that the country was not able to finance itself at sustainable rates or maturities. So at this point is what is expected. It was only a matter of time. It's only needed. It's needed to say this is probably a temporary bailout request. I mean, we'll have elections very soon. A new government will step up in June. So I think this request for bailout is for June only. Then, with a new government with more power, let's say, we'll be able to negotiate a complete package for the longer term.
Filipe, let's just have a listen to exactly what the caretaker Prime Minister said just earlier.
The situation is extremely grave for our country. I'm firmly convinced, having gone through every single alternative, and after all the contacts that I've made, especially today, that the situation will get worse if nothing else is done.
Yeah, he didn't make it clear at that point whether he was referring to a short-term loan until the country's snap election in June or a fully-fledged bailout like the ones Ireland and Greece received. Filipe, you believe that this is a short-term loan, do you?
Yes, I do, because this is a caretaker government, and our constitution does not allow that long-term measures are taken by the caretaker government. So, and he mentioned in a subtle way in this speech that it would be something in the limits of our constitution. So my reading at this point is that it will be some kind of a bridge loan till June, a month in which we'll have a big spending because some bonds will mature also at that date. And then with a new government, a complete package might be negotiated.
Okay, Filipe, stay with me. I want to bring Richard Quest in for some comment on this as well. Richard, we're just explaining this story as we get it in here to CNN. We're looking at a short-term loan for Portugal from the European Union as they hit crisis point there in that country. Your reaction?
The inevitability of today, Becky, came when they had their 6-month auction today and the rate was over 5%. Suddenly, it was simply no longer sustainable for Portugal to continue its financing as it had been. But frankly, Becky, the length of time it's taken the Portuguese to come to this position is bordering on disgrace. They will blame, as indeed they are, the Prime Minister of Portugal, the finance minister, is blaming the irresponsible markets for having driven them to this. The reality is that everybody in the markets has said that Portugal has needed this for a lot longer. Yes, they will get a short-term loan, but the fact is, as your previous guest was just saying, Becky, who's going to negotiate it? To what terms? What austerity measures will they agree to? It's one thing to say we need help, but Portugal until now has refused to necessarily take the measures that the rest of the world is demanding.
Stay with me, Richard. Filipe, the rising rates on Portuguese borrowing just adding to the sense of crisis in the Eurozone at this point. How do you expect markets to cope with this news on opening tomorrow?
Well, I think with some relief, at least in Portuguese markets. You see, there was a growing risk day by day of a liquidity crisis, a payment crisis, and that was the thing that the people were most fearing. You see, not that it was a huge move, but there are reports of some people making banking runs to withdraw their deposits. And this is a sign of despair and fear. And I think that knowing that the European Union is going to help the country, that will be that will give some relief to the people. So it's a good sign.
Richard, what does this say about the wider European picture at this point?
And calamitous situation. Just think, Becky, in the next 24 hours, the ECB is going to meet in Frankfurt, and the first rate rise is expected. You have growth rates of 2-point-something% for Germany. You have Ireland virtually in recession. The measures that Greece is taking has pushed it into recession, and I suspect once the full-scale Portuguese government is reaffirmed, then they will also have to take strong measures that could well push Portugal back into recession. The core question that people are asking, and they're asking openly, is when there will be a dose of realism. When will these countries recognize that there has to be a restructuring of their debt, however it's dressed up? That's the big unknown at the moment. Becky, whether it's Greece, Ireland or Portugal, pouring money into those countries is not sustainable.
Filipe, tough times ahead.
Well, in a way, but at this point we have to balance the pros and cons of getting help. Of course, it's not good for growth because these austerity measures that are lying ahead will be hard. It will be imposed. They won't promote growth. And actually, it would be difficult to us to return to the markets again. And of course, there is some reputation issue around here. But let's face it, at this point, the most important thing is to avoid a liquidity crisis, a bank run, and a contagion to the rest of the Eurozone. So not speaking on a broader perspective, only on a narrow perspective, these are the news that can relieve the markets for the short term.
Richard, what sort of message does this send investors outside of the European zone about what's going on here?
It tells them that Europe still has not got to grips with this sovereign debt crisis. Your guess is right. It's a liquidity crisis, but it's also a solvency crisis in some of these countries. And the fact is, there is a transference of wealth now taking place from the rich northern countries to the southern countries, that those have to reform. And Becky, when interest rates go up tomorrow, as most people expect from Jean-Claude Trichet, then that gap becomes bigger, the pain becomes greater, and the countries like Germany and those wealthy northern countries of Europe will have to foot the bill.
Richard Quest, we thank you for that. Filipe, we thank you from Portugal this evening. CNN's John Defterios joins me now in the studio for more on the situation in Portugal and what it means for Europe and indeed the world at this point. Let's just bring you up to date, because I know you've just walked in order to have this discussion with me. This is a short-term loan, not exactly what we saw